All right, we are live. I am excited to talk to this guy today. The last time I talked to him was 2017 when he was at Howard. And I mean, it was simple times back then, Brennan. Things have evolved quite a bit since that time, huh?
No doubt. Been blessed to, this football has taken me everywhere. So definitely
Yeah.
enjoying this football journey.
So, kind of just going back on the timeline, I initially connected with you in 2017 because I was looking through college football history and just throwing out some stats of stuff I thought was cool, and it brought me to Brennan Marion, and his 2007 2008 seasons at Tulsa. Um, and, there was some cool stuff that kind of came out of that era of those teams. And I just figured you could talk about that for maybe a couple minutes of Charles Clay and the coaching and the highly prolific offenses that allowed you to average, high 20s yards per reception, which, kind of leads into all these players that you've kind of been working with the last half century, half decade now.
Yeah. Well, I was in junior college and, Coach Norvell had reached out to me if he got this job at Tulsa that he would call me. And Coach Malzahn was there. Gus Malzahn, Todd Graham was the head coach. And basically just if he got the opportunity there that he would call me and and let those guys see my tape. And when those guys saw my tape, I think they called me on like a Wednesday. They flew me out on a Thursday, and I was out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I remember I showed up in a suit and was just like, man, I really want this opportunity. And it was late for me at the end of junior college. And so I got the opportunity to go out there, and I just remember Coach Malzahn saying, like, him being a high school coach and just had leaving Arkansas, he was like, we're going to set all these records and do all this crazy stuff on offense. We're going to be an you're going to be an All-American. We're going to go fast. And I just remember being like, man, this guy's crazy, but I kind of like his confidence. I just thought like, damn, he's pretty confident. He believed that he could get it done. And Mike Norvell, who's, obviously at Florida State now, he was the same way. Like, I'm going to coach you hard and we're going to make sure you're great. And I just like those guys' mentality. They were hustlers and they wanted to find a way, any way possible to win. And, our team that year was pretty crazy. We all showed up in the summertime. There was two guys that were holdovers on the offense, Paul Smith and Terrion Adams. And we had a 5,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard rusher with Terrion, and Paul threw for 5,000. And then we had 3,000-yard receivers, Charles Clay, me, and Trey Johnson, all in one season. And I think that was the first time in the history of college football that a team had done that. And so all the things that Coach Malzahn had said had came to fruition, but it was pretty crazy how, we didn't even practice together until like the first or second week of fall camp. And now we're, one of the top offenses in the country.
So you have those 2 years, and I'll say, those offenses are a lot of what things looked like. It was just way early of what these offenses look like today. So you have those two record-breaking years, and then you kind of head to, I believe it was the Miami Dolphins, right? And then
Yeah.
you had an injury. But you were in there. You were cutting it up in the NFL for a
Yeah.
little bit, right?
I always tell people I got to the show, I just didn't get to dance,
Yeah,
so,
right.
I got there, but didn't ultimately make my goal of getting to the end zone and making big plays and playing games. But, it was a blessing for me to be able to, you know, get paid by the NFL for 2 seasons. And, so that was a big deal as well.
And I think you had a picture with Joey Porter the other day, right? I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, years ago, I mean, because I was from Pittsburgh, he always made sure he took care of me in the locker room. Like, hey, he's a Pittsburgh guy, so he would
Yeah.
take care of me.
Well, that's a guy that will definitely take care of you if you need it.
No doubt.
um,
No doubt.
so after that, I mean, when did you start thinking coaching was going to be a thing for you? Because you've had sort of a long journey. I didn't even know this, and I looked. So you were at Arizona State for a little while, but when did you start thinking about coaching as a thing that might be a career for you?
Well, as a kid, it was funny. I was always like the guy who organized the teams. Like, when I lived in the projects, like I'd have the team ready, I'd get the team together, make the team. I was always like all football, watching the draft, writing every player's name down. I've always kind of been like a football nerd, reading football biographies. I remember my mom used to take me to the Steelers training camp in Latrobe, and I'd sit there and ask Rod Woodson and Levon Kirkland like any football question they would answer. So I've kind of always just been, obsessed with it. And then really what happened was, if those that can't teach, so I was hurt trying to figure out what I'm going to do. When I got hurt with
Mm.
the Dolphins, this was my second or third ACL surgery in 2 years. It's like, all right, now you need to figure out what the hell you're going to do with life. And I went out. One of my friends, who's actually an agent now, he was like, "Man, you should try coaching high school ball. While you're just killing time or whatever, you're not doing anything." And I went to James Logan High School in Union City in California, and the coach there was like, "Go out there and just run those plays like you did at Tulsa. Like call that stuff from there,
Mm.
and the kids will like you." And I kind of went out there and just got around the kids, and I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
I imagine you are wide receivers' favorite at some of the places you go with some of the stats these guys ended up putting up. So yeah, you go to Arizona State, Oklahoma Baptist, and then when I talked to you in 2017, I believe you were at Howard. And so once you kind of get to Howard, you're probably starting to think like, okay, this is starting to be pretty cool here. I'm starting to really make an impact here. Talk about I guess that time, and then you go to William and Mary, and then ultimately Hawaii after that. So I mean, what has this journey been like going to all these offenses? Kind of moving up in your career, but also getting some good time in a lot of locker rooms.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been about the players, the
Yeah.
relationships. When you come from a broken home or family where you don't have a ton of family, football's always been like my closest relationships, and I always equate a lot of my success and relationships and people that I've met through the game of football. So that's always kind of been a near and dear thing to my heart. I think the one thing that was cool was I got the Howard job through Brandon London, who was a teammate of mine when I was on the Dolphins. His dad, Mike London, was the head coach at UVA. And when he was at UVA, I was a high school head coach, and I had brought my team up there. And he was like, "Man, I like the way you operate and work with your team. One day when I get a chance, I'm gonna hire you." And when he got the
Uh,
Howard job, he called me and said, "Hey, man, you want to run that crazy offense that you run in high school?" And that's how I got to Howard. And so, obviously the first game at Howard, we had the biggest upset in college football history, and it kind of just took off from there.
oh, that's so funny. Brandon London, um, he went to UMass, and yeah, he was back in the 2000s. That guy was for my UMass Minutemen. That was a big player for us. That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So Hawaii, you get to Hawaii. There was a guy at Hawaii when you were there, Calvin Austin, who I'm doing my fantasy football nerdy stuff, and he was a guy that kind of popped out as like, man, this guy's doing a lot here for this team. Super versatile. What did you think about Calvin and that whole Hawaii team there?
Yeah, it was crazy because it was during COVID. So obviously you get to live in Hawaii during COVID. Like the beach
Mm.
is wide open, like you're just like living life. But I think the one thing that was unique with Calvin, my experience of being at Howard and William and Mary and seeing him, he was an FCS quarterback at I want to say Jacksonville, where their program closed down. And then we were able to get him out there at Hawaii, and all the coaches were asking me like, "What position is he?" I'm like, "Listen, this dude was like a freak at triple option quarterback. Like he can play
Yeah.
running back, receiver. Just get him the ball." He played wildcat quarterback for us, returner, and in every game he just made one of those big wow plays. And and I remember we played Houston in the bowl game, and he returned a punt. He caught a touchdown. Like he had a couple big runs. He played wildcat quarterback and scored. Like he was like the player of the game. He was always just able to just make those, splash plays. And I think he was one of those players where he loved football so much you could line him up anywhere, and he knew exactly what the concept, what the scheme was, and what was trying to get accomplished on the play. So what he lacked in like speed and size and stuff, he could make up with his football intelligence.
Mm. Yeah, Rico Bussey, another guy that kind of popped on, for yardage wise. I forget where he was before, but he's a pretty good player as well. And then you had Stovall. He ended up going to Pittsburgh, and I always ask this. I've talked to a few guys, and um, uh, I talked to Jarrett Stearns last year, and he talked about transferring with a few people. So you ended up going to Pittsburgh after that, and Stovall ended up going to Pittsburgh. Was that connected at all?
Yeah, I mean, we got really close. I mean, anytime you have COVID going on and you can't really practice as much, and
Mm.
you're on an island, like we were in Hawaii, and so I remember those guys were at my house every day. I'm still close with all those guys, Rico and Stovall, and like Jared. There were so many guys, Cal, like all those guys I was with every single day. Like fed them, took care of them, hung out, went to the
Wow.
beach. I mean, so we all had a really close relationship through COVID. Because really you're like quarantined and you're only allowed with your football team. So we got really close.
That's
But
awesome.
Stovall, as far as the toughness that he brought and the type of football player that he was, I mean, he was an old school throwback. A lot of those guys were Rico Bussey, like he played with a torn ACL. Like
Wow.
he played without an ACL and made it. I think he was on the Steelers roster for a year or 2 years with no ACL. I mean, he played that year at Hawaii. Kids tough as hell. Like those were the type of kids that we had there. And when I went over to Pitt, he graduated from Hawaii, and then he transferred over as a graduate transfer, and he really helped just set the toughness in that room. The mentality and how he knew exactly how I coached a wideout position, and it helped those guys in that room see what the standard was.
Yeah, so at that point, you're starting to get a feel, you always kind of had a feel, but a better feel for what you wanted offenses to look like, right? And then, as those things evolve, it's like you get all these players that you probably have to adjust slightly or kind of fit game plans a little bit, but ultimately, um, there's this system that's probably starting to build for you, right?
Yeah, it's just really just the selfless type of playing football, like with a basketball mentality, doing everything it takes, not when you don't have the ball, and then just the toughness and effort it takes. Like, I always say we want to play like with a basketball and a defensive mentality. From the standpoint, we want to be selfless and we want to be tough and play with great
Mm-hmm.
effort. On defense, they could do everything wrong, but one guy's going hard as hell and then makes the play, and the whole defense might have been wrong. But if one guy is going hard and then you get 11 guys doing that, then great things happen. And I think on offense sometimes, because it is a skill type of thing, you feel like you don't have to play as hard. But if you get offensive guys to take on that mentality and play hard, even if you lack the skill or the talent, you're able to make that up with how hard and how selfless you can play.
Yeah. And so then you get to Pittsburgh. And I mean, of course, you were there with Jordan Addison that year. You had such special production. Um, when you get there, are you like right away? Oh, this is probably gonna work well with what I'm coaching. And was this you also had Kenny Pickett there, Jared Wayne, a few other guys as well. Was it pretty clear early on that that was going to be like a special offense?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was Kenny believing in me and knowing that I could get the wideouts right. Him and Coach Whipple, that I could get it done, and then with the wideouts, really, it was just a standpoint of like, those were the first group of kids where I would say if there was 12 receivers in the room, and they saw what I did with the Hawaii group of players, it kind of just trickulated over and it was a more talented group. You know what I'm saying? So they
Mm,
saw how I coached the Hawaii guys and all of them played. At Hawaii, we had even Lincoln Victor. Lincoln Victor didn't play a lot for us. He went to Washington State and was like team captain and played a lot over there. And he was like our special teams guy. Like every single receiver
wow.
touched the field. Like it was like really personal to me, like being a former high school head coach and being a coordinator at the FCS level, that I was trying to prove that every single one of my receivers, even if you were a walk on, you could get on the field and make plays and impact the game. And so when I got to Pitt, there was a group of guys, Tayseer Mack, Jared Wayne,
Yeah.
Mel Keys, Jordan, and obviously Jordan's talent was, I mean, the dude doesn't have ankles or knees. Like he can cut, stop, do anything. But their thing was like they listened to every single thing I told them and they did it like on their own. Like they took it as their own thing. Like, at 10 o'clock at night, Jordan and them would be in the indoor catching from the jugs machine because Coach Marion said we need to catch 150 a day, or, like
Right.
they really took it on and did it. Tayseer Mack and Jared Wayne, they'd be taking notes and writing down. And I was teaching them like they were the quarterback and they were learning how to line up and play off each other and play a certain way. And so, ultimately the results came that year from those guys taking the coaching. Like Kenny had been so coached up from Coach Whipple,
Mm,
um, and they just like made it their own thing. They started to like make it their own. Like they would take the coaching and then they would make it their own. And none of those kids ever, when they got coached hard, they never complained or quit or, didn't want the coaching. They wanted to be coached hard, and ultimately the results took care of themselves on the field.
and you've kind of talked about this a few times already, but obviously this is more than just college football for you. These are guys that you become friendly with and have this connection with for, um, maybe life, but also, just kind of this connection of their football careers. So what is that like, even, post football, where you're still connecting with these guys and it's like a friendship?
Yeah, I mean, everybody, when obviously when Jordan Addison transferred and left Pitt, everybody thought he would come to Texas, where I was at currently, and he
Mm,
ended up going to USC. And then, the one thing that was special for me is like all that work that we put in together and all the time that we spent. Like I was the only coach that he brought to the draft. I sat with him and his family in the draft room and went through that whole process with them. And that was special to me from the standpoint. I mean, he had a lot of big time coaches that he could have brought there
sure.
with him, and he thought enough of me to invite me and bring me there. So I think the relationship piece is just like I don't even start without that starting first, and it happens organically. Some kids it takes a few days, some kids it takes a few months, some kids it takes maybe a year, and then they go like, "Damn, coach, I really see what you were saying now." But I think it's
Mm,
anytime you're trying to really push somebody to be, different or do something great, if you don't have any connection with them, it's going to be hard for that to happen. You're not going to be able to move that person to go against their will and do things that they don't want to do because it is uncomfortable to try to be the best, the 1%. So that's why I've always focused on just building an organic, real, vulnerable relationship first and opening up to the kids because then I feel like they're able to play harder and play better when you're straining and you might have seen me cussing somebody out and they're like, I
sure.
love you, coach. It's not even personal. So that comes from them knowing that every single day I'm trying to make them the best possible person and player they can become.
I love that. So leading into that, so how did you end up at Texas? Because you ended up there in Texas football. It had been a little up and down, and you kind of got there as things were really looking good. They've had some really good teams over the last 3 to 4 years. Of course, you worked with Xavier Worthy, Jordan Whittington, Tariq Milton, Bijan, etc. I know Bijan's
Yeah,
a running back, but I'm sure he,
yeah,
he got into some of those wide receiver conversations while you were
no doubt. And
you
this is
were
a fact.
there.
Bijan Robinson had the best hands in the program. I mean, bar none, he had the best hands. I know the receivers, Jay Witt and X are going to kill me for that, but that's a fact. Bijan had the best hands for sure.
Oh
Um,
man. Yeah.
I really got that job through um, Xavier Worthy, and then Coach Whipple and Sark. I remember Coach Whips sent me a text, hook 'em, and I'm like, what you talk about, Coach Whip? Because he had already left to Nebraska, but he had, obviously gave me a great recommendation to Coach
Mm,
Sark and let him know that I was a quality coach. And then Xavier Worthy, I had known since he was 14. And we had just kept a relationship going. And I know when the receiver job opened up there, he was just like, Coach, you got to, him and his mom were like blowing me up, like, Coach, you gotta come to Texas. And I'm like, Texas? I don't know Sark. Like, he's not going to talk to me, like, and they're like, he's going to call
yeah.
you. He's going to call you. He's going to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, I'm thinking like, yeah, right. Sark's not calling me. He's been in the NFL. He knows tons of
Yeah.
guys. So ultimately, he came up and we kind of, he's a quarterback. I'm a receiver, so we both love to throw the ball, and we connected on that and how we could do that. And then he likes to play a tough brand of football, and I think that was our connection, and was able to help get the program. Obviously. Texas is a monster of its own, but Sark trusted me to go get some really good receivers, and like a guy like Jay Witt, we're really close. We just
Yeah.
talked the other day. He was actually going to leave, and just be done with football, not leave to transfer. He loved Texas. He was going to just be done with football, and I was like, man, you got to give it another year. Like, you got to try this thing, and then they go to the playoffs this year, and so just relationships like that I was able to build where guys like that might have been done with football. He had so many injuries that he was ready to just pack it up. And he was like, no, I'm gonna give it another year and keep playing, and then ultimately help lead them in the playoffs, to the playoffs.
Yeah, so Whittington, I mean, he was there at a time where you had, obviously Worthy and Adonai Mitchell this year, but Whittington, I didn't know he had all those injuries, but it was always like, oh, this guy's talented when you watch
Yeah,
these games, and like maybe he doesn't have the biggest role on this team, but it's like there's something there.
no doubt. I mean, he's a big time football player. He's tough. I think, as far as, any team that's after him, as far as drafting him, I mean, they're going to get a guy who can play running back, receiver, special teams, and be a leadership role. I remember he beat the coaches there. I mean, we're getting there at 5:30 and he's
Yeah,
there like in the hot tub, like, Coach, how you doing? Like, he's like the old man of the group, like doing everything right, eating the right way. So I think his leadership was very imperative to what Texas was able to accomplish this year.
absolutely. One other guy on that team that maybe didn't get some of the praise as the other guys, but so Tariq Milton, right? He was a guy in 2019 who I was like, "Oh wow, this is going to be like a high-end deep threat." I believe he play with yeah, he was there with Brock Purdy, and he was a really good college football player. What was your experience with Milton and his so that was his fifth year, senior year,
Yeah.
but what were your thoughts on Tariq Milton?
I love Tariq. We always called him Uncle Milt. He was the old
Yeah.
man in the room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
a great worker and highly intelligent kid. Didn't have to show you had to show him the diagram one time, show him a play one time, show him video. He knew exactly what to do. Very low maintenance in the standpoint that he was just a ball guy. And we always just we used to walk together and just spend time on far as like just opening up and and just smiling a little bit. A tough Florida kid that really just loved football, and
Mm.
I think he added something to that room of every time we put him in there, he was able to go make a play for us. I remember we were playing Texas Tech, and unfortunately we lost that game. But what happened was he was able in the 2 minute drive to make a crazy down the field deep ball catch to get us to overtime. He got us in an overtime situation by his plays that he made, and he always kind of came up with a play whenever he got an opportunity to make a play. He made it.
Love it. All right, so next thing up, so you end up going to UNLV, and I guess we'll kind of end here. So you're at UNLV, and now you're taking on a bigger role here, right? You are quarterbacks. You're basically the offensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, I'm
What
no C here.
Yeah, so you're taking on, I mean, it's kind of like you were always, working with the offense, but this is like um this was kind of your thing this year. So I guess talk about taking on, how'd you get to UNLV and taking on sort of that next step into the whole offense rather than just wide receivers.
Yeah, it's always been weird to me when I got into college football. Like, I came from being a high school head coach. We had 125 kids on the team.
Yeah.
You had to prepare the little league program and everybody, like the whole town. And so when I got into college football, everybody's like, "That's my room," or "That's my group," and I'm like, "It's like 10 guys. It's like not even a big deal." You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
to me, it's always just been like, I've kind of always just tried to coach the whole team. Even when I was a coordinator at Howard and William and Mary, I've tried to help with the
Mhm.
defensive guys, the offensive guys, special teams, just try to be a part of the whole team because it's weird when you only have such a small group and it's a team game. So for me, it's just been, Coach Odom had gave me a great opportunity to come here. Um, and the one thing I love about Coach Odom is his yes means yes and his no means no.
Mhm.
He's a real football guy. He played the game and he's honest and loyal and far as, exactly what his word means. That's what you get. And he was really just gave me carte blanche to run the offense and do my deal. He didn't say like, don't run the two backs on the same side or don't do this. Let you do this. Like he was just
Yeah.
like, you got it. Let's make it happen. And we were able to have a lot of success on offense this year. And I really think it's just that mentality of, playing selfless and playing with high effort and then, challenging the real guys. I always say like the top guys have to make top plays all the time, and the top guys made good plays, and then the guys that are right underneath that, push the top guys for that spot. And our guys have did a great job this year of just continually making plays and raising their standard here at UNLV. This first time ever to get to the conference championship game since they've been in the
Yeah.
Mountain West for 25 years. It's the first time it ever happened,
Yeah.
and to play in a big bowl game like we did. Unfortunately, we came up short, but all the work that we put in to catch those teams, because when we were behind those teams. We had 40 or 50 new guys come in last offseason, and they believed in what Coach Odom's vision was for the program and all the work that we put in, and ultimately got us to play in the conference title for the first time ever in school history.
Yeah, so one of those guys, Vincent Smith, did you know him? I mean, you obviously knew him when he was at Pitt, right? But he came in and basically was one of the starters for that team this year. So, he came from Pitt. Did you know him
Yeah,
from
yeah,
your
Vince
time there?
Davis. Yeah, Vince Davis. I always loved him when I was at Pitt. I thought he was a throwback player. I like guys that are tough, and don't and love practice. Vince was one of those guys who just loved practice. He was always out there
Mm,
talking crap and practicing hard. And at Pitt, we had a really great defense. Kalasha Cansey, Servassier Dennis. There was a
yeah.
lot of Damari Mathis. A lot of great football players on defense. And when you go up against them every day, you got to be tough. They're you better bring it. And Vince was just one of those guys who was always consistent in his energy and his toughness. And when he got in the portal, I just knew like, man, this is a guy who could really help us
Yeah.
here. You always want guys that set the standard of how you want to practice every day, the energy and the toughness that you want to bring each day. Guys that are not complaining but excited to go out there and practice and get better.
Yeah, so 2023 Ricky White, 1483 yards, 8 touchdowns. Not bad, huh?
Yeah, the whole receiver deal. I think Coach Alexander, our receiver coach, did a great job of, instilling that confidence and toughness in the room. And Ricky is one of those kids where he is just like a Jordan, where if you tell him, if you uh, do 28 backflips, it'll make you a better receiver. Like he'll
Right.
do it. Whatever you say needs to get done for him to be a better player. He's all for doing that. I think Ricky, obviously had a hell of a season, but the type of teammate he is and the type of toughness that he showed. He's one of our best blockers down the field. He made a lot of big
Mm,
blocks to spring big runs. And then his intelligence was able to coach him like a quarterback from the standpoint he could line up anywhere. I always feel like receivers really limit themselves on how good they could be if they don't know the whole concept. A lot of schemes and systems. don't design it for the receiver to be able to line up in every spot. Ricky lined up, at every single spot, inside, outside. We don't have a, you're only this receiver or you only line up on this side. In our offense, receivers move around and they're multiple. And Ricky was an intelligent guy and he was able to do that.
So speaking of sort of challenges and learning a lot, so you started a freshman quarterback, Jaden. I mean, talk about that. So obviously you get him in there, and he's got some potential, and he ends up starting basically the whole year for you, and is one of kind of the young players that emerges in that conference. Talk about starting a freshman quarterback and all the. I mean, he handled it really well, but that's got to be a challenge, especially with, there's a lot of COVID year, fifth year seniors. He's a young guy going up against some teams with 22, 23, 24-year-old guys. So any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd really say that, his work ethic and his natural ability to play the game is really what, catapulted him to the success that he had this year. But I think one thing that really helped me with him, where he was a redshirt freshman, he was in the room the year
Mm,
before and he really didn't get, much development, shy, quiet kid. He was from the west side of the island in Hawaii. But I
mm,
think that my time in Hawaii kind of helped me be able to communicate with him and understand where he was coming from. I always say I try to meet kids where they're at
sure.
and not just, I think you can be a great teacher once you have that connection. I think if you're trying to teach somebody who you're not connected to, those teachings might fall on deaf ears. So once we got connected and I let him know that I lived on the island and, I understood kind of his culture and what he was about, then he kind of opened up more and we were able to communicate, which, our offense is very complicated. It's not a high school,
Right.
barely get by type of offense. There's a lot that goes into it. And, he was able to retain the information. And then, the one thing about him was he was always kind of good under pressure. In the 2-minute drills that he led throughout the year and, going to win big games and make plays, he was able to always kind of get that done throughout the season. He did a lot of great things for us, and we always talk about the mentality of just one great year can change your life, and obviously for him and his family that definitely happened.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, that's pretty much all I had for you. If there's anything you want to, I guess you don't really need to plug anything. You're an offensive coordinator, so you don't have anything to plug. But yeah, if there's anything you want to say before we kind of head out of here.
No, man, I appreciate you all these years, just staying in contact with you, and I'm just grateful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brennan. All right.
All
And
right,
yeah, we'll see you guys later.
all right, brother.